Hey guys, welcome to the Dude Seriously Show. Well, we're still on the road to Infinity War, and this week is Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Tim.
And I'm the coach.
And we're talking about Spider-Man Homecoming. So, what did you guys think of Spider-Man's first appearance in a solo film in the MCU?
I think for me, it was probably average, middle of the road. I mean, it was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So full disclosure, the three of us saw the movie at an advanced screening, and that was kind of interesting, because we saw this movie and then you want to tell your friends, but you don't, and you can only talk to each other. And it was exciting to, see Spider-Man come into the MCU, but there are some points that really worked for me, and there are some points that really don't. But I guess that's with any movie, right? But this one in particular, it hits home a little more, because everybody likes Spider-Man. Everybody. I mean, he doesn't have to be your favorite, but everybody likes him. And so it's a little more, in the heart. So I don't know. There's parts I like, there's parts I don't like.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just going to let loose as soon as...
I know, like you said, we saw it together, but we see a lot of these movies together. But the unique thing about this one was, Mike and I are old school, obviously. We remember Spider-Man one way, whereas people nowadays remember Spider-Man differently. The whole time I'm watching that movie, especially with the tech popping up all the time, I kept looking over my shoulder, looking for Mike to go, I bet he's not liking this.
Yeah.
The tech really is what separates it, though, because Garfield was kind of techy, but not as much as this.
Yeah, but in both those movies, they built their own suits. Whether you believe that they could put them together and make them look that cohesive and that, just tight as far as quality, they did it. In this movie, it's given to them, which is just not the story I recall for Spider-Man.
No, it's not. Peter is his own person, and that's the intentionality of it, is that he loses Uncle Ben, we'll get to that later, during his formidable years, and is forced into a situation where he has to do a lot of things on his own now, but he relies on the morals and ethics that have been given to him by his uncle.
If you go back to the Maguire one, the famous line, great power comes great responsibility. That really is the key to Spider-Man. Even though it doesn't carry through the other movies or even into this one, that really is what Spider-Man is all about.
Absolutely, and that is born out of the comics. You can read comics time and time again where that is his moral code, and he goes back to it over and over again without question. And that's what kills me with respect to this, as I felt like that was a huge hole in this film. And they do, in my opinion, again, a substandard substitution with Iron Man?
Well, you have to even remember in Civil War when he first gets his introduction, he seems like a more cohesive and with it character than he does in this movie. It's like he backtracks. This is 6 months later, and he's fighting low-level criminals again. He just faced off with the premier characters of the MCU and held his own.
Absolutely.
He did fine. And then to have him face off against low-level thugs and he can't do his own thing anymore, or feels dependent on what Stark or Happy Hogan kind of hand down to him, it felt like a big setback for the character. Mm-hmm. He's kind of getting his ass handed to him. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
Language.
But again, he just faced off with premier level characters, held his own, and he can't handle street level thugs.
Well, yeah, and he makes mistakes. He's the reason why his delicatessen gets destroyed, whereas he handled the situation flawlessly facing off against Winter Soldier, and then he's the one who comes up with how to take down Ant-Man / Giant Man. So he keeps his cool the entire time. He takes Cap's shield, doesn't even sweat it. Battles Cap, doesn't sweat it, and then all of a sudden he's fighting.
He does lose though.
He does. He does, because again, no, we won't get to that. But
that's a different movie.
But the fact is, all of a sudden he doesn't have cognitive reasoning skills. That goes along with it. No, come on, that's ridiculous. And again, if you're going to make him a super-powered guy in one instance, and then we want him to be ho-hum teenager in the second instance, you create a huge inconsistency. Especially, like you said, it's 6 months. He should be evolving as a character, not losing a step.
I guess the one thing I would say about that is, he had a taste of what it's like to be a superhero.
Right.
And, he's just craving that again. So you can see him really jonesing to get back with those guys. And like you said earlier, he wants to be an Avenger.
Right.
But he's still got to learn the ropes a little bit. I guess that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
But it's just like, you just used this costume. And in Civil War, there's no hint that there's all this tech going on inside
there's
of it.
not.
And then you see when he gets his own movie, it's an Iron Man suit, essentially. That makes no sense.
None.
And speaking of sense, he doesn't have spider sense.
Right.
What is that about?
Yeah.
That's one of his biggest...
It is the thing, and that's the problem, is that when Spidey gets bit by the spider, he instantly gains all those powers. There's not this whole idea, and I know there's been retcon throughout the comics to try to make that, something that came along throughout, but we all know he gets bit by the spider, he gains the powers, and that's how it works. He's not afraid of heights.
Exactly.
Come on. Afraid of heights, no spider sense. It's ridiculous.
So we talked about this a little bit before, but Uncle Ben is noticeably absent from this film. And, from the other two Spider-Man films, Uncle Ben is a point that we've seen, played out, but it's essential to this character. It's what makes Spider-Man who he is.
I think for this movie, they tried to avoid the origin story a little too much. They didn't want to get into the spider bite, although they talk about it just a little bit, and so you know what's going on if you didn't already know. But part of that is they left out that Uncle Ben reference or part of the story where he gets his morals, he gets his standing on how to be a hero.
And that's the biggest point of all of it. Tony, as far as we know, is the guy who's shaping Peter. Who's Ben? He's not even mentioned by name, folks. Pay attention to that when you watch the film.
And there's no reference of him losing his parents, which is a big loss for anybody.
Nope.
And there's no
There's
reference of
none.
him losing Uncle Ben. So
Nope.
he's lost his dad, he's lost his uncle, who was his stand-in dad, and now he has this
The only
third guy,
Yeah.
potentially as a stand-in father, and he's reprimanding him for getting out and about and doing
Yeah.
things that he told him not to do.
Yeah, because the only thing we hear is when he says, we can't do this to my aunt because she's already been through so much. Well, what is so much? It's not even defined. It's just she's been through something. And we're supposed to know it's Ben, but again, we don't know it's Ben.
So, no matter where you fall in this film, there's one thing that everybody loves, and that is Michael Keaton as the Vulture.
I thought he was Birdman.
Well, he
No,
was.
Batman.
Was he always like a bird
he's an
wing
avian
type
or something?
thing?
I guess so.
Okay,
What's
anyway,
left?
sorry.
Maybe he could be Hawkman?
Yeah, I could. I guess so.
Maybe. I don't know. I guess that's all that's left.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyways, everybody loves Michael Keaton as the Vulture.
Yeah.
He was charismatic. I love what they did with his character where you feel for him. The movie opens with, his cleaning up. You feel for him. He's put stuff on the line. And as he descends into his villainy and evil, you get it.
He's not a big bad like a Loki trying to take over the world or a Thanos taking over the universe. He's intimidating, but he's also very relatable.
Yeah. I mean, all the way to the end where he has the opportunity to, in prison, give away the
Identity.
right.
Yep.
And doesn't.
Yep.
He just he
He-
goes all in.
he
So there is
knows-
a certain amount of, again, morality within him, but it's obviously conflicted.
Yeah, I don't think he's a bad guy. It's almost like the Punisher line, you're just one bad day away from being me. I mean, he's really not a bad guy. It's just the situation he's in. And anybody can relate to that.
Right. My biggest issue with the Vulture, of course, though, was the scene in which he allows Liz to walk inside to the dance and then figures out that Peter is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And he pulls the gun out and he holds it right here and he looks over his shoulder and he begins to...
Threaten him, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Threaten him and then threatens to kill his family if he does anything to his family. Well, at that point, you're threatening a kid who has lost his parents, lost his uncle, and the only remnant of family he has left is his aunt, and that's who you're going to threaten? If I'm Peter, at that moment, that quick, I've grabbed the gun, I've gotten out of the car, I'm holding it with my finger, and I'm spinning it like a basketball until it's over, right? And then think, movie over, Vulture.
Roll credits.
Yeah, because are you serious? You just threatened a kid who has lost his family, and you're like, and you're at the moral high ground because you have a family you're protecting.
Well, I mean, probably a little bit to Keaton or Vulture's defense. He doesn't necessarily know Peter's story,
Right.
But my
Peter does.
My agreement with you is that with all his reactions and skills, he could have done everything you said. He could have totally disarmed him and taken over that situation. To make him a little more intimidated by that guy, especially when he's just in normal street clothes, it didn't really make sense.
No, not at all. Not even remotely. And then we have to have the scene later on where Peter finally finds himself, which is borrowed from the comics, where he's being crushed. But that was the moment that, again, I feel like that's the missing layer issues that we have, where they have, it's like a Jenga, and they're daring the thing to fall down by pulling out a piece here and a piece there and saying, I hope the movie doesn't collapse, because we're trying so desperately to keep this story that we want to build going.
Yeah.
Without really giving it enough support in order to stand on its own.
Yeah. So one thing I would like to talk about is how they intro into the movie, because it felt really tied into the MCU. You're picking up right after the Battle of New York. They're harvesting all that alien tech and the alien corpses and whatever. And even his little Vulture's little kid draws a picture of all the Avengers, and he's like really proud of it. And then he gets shut down, and it cuts to 8 years later. Do we know what that's supposed to relate to? Because it doesn't add up with the timeline.
Yeah.
That would be 2020.
Yeah, it doesn't add up to the timeline at all. You're totally right. I've heard, because when the film came out, I remember us being in the theater like,
what?
Yeah,
like leaning over. I remember reading around the time that the film came out, I think Kevin Feige said something that in the end it will all be explained.
Okay.
It's going to make sense in the end.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if it making sense is going to be Marvel coming out 20 years from now and going, yeah, we meant to write 6. Just hit the wrong.
It was a typo.
Yeah, it was a typo.
Sorry.
Oopsie, on the retcon.
I don't know how they're going to ultimately end up explaining it, but I remember reading somebody saying that it would be explained at some
But then it does lead into that really cool little home video that Peter's shooting on his way to Germany to meet up with the other guys, and how he's narrating behind the scenes of the battle, which was actually really cool.
Yeah.
That was done really, really well.
The alternate angles were pretty fun to see.
Yeah, and it was, but it's just cool that it's another creative way of like referencing the movie before it or the tie-in before it without doing a literal just flashback or whatever. It felt original to me.
And as the millennial on the panel, that's totally something the millennials do. Millennials tend to, want to document everything and take selfies and oh my gosh, and all this. And Peter being younger than I, it's even more expected that he would do that. It's totally believable.
And he's totally acting like a kid in that.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's like, how excited would you be? I mean, I know we don't have the opportunity to really do this kind of stuff, but how excited would you be if you had the opportunity to do something like that? You'd be going nuts. And like you said, documenting everything.
Yeah.
That's how I get every time I hang out with you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, most times, not.
Wow.
Dude, seriously, it'd be a little weird if it was
Golly
every time.
gee!
That's what I was waiting on.
Hey, guys. Well, I think that's about it for Spider-Man Homecoming. The movie should stand on its own, and it does that. Even if it's not comic accurate, it does stand on its own. In this universe, maybe his spider sense is nerfed. Maybe Uncle Ben doesn't matter as much in this universe. We are comparing it to the comic universe, and I'm with you guys. I wish it was more like the comic universe, but the way it stands on its own, I think it holds up. So for me, I really enjoyed Spider-Man Homecoming for what it was, but I do think it had some shortcomings.
For me, I enjoyed it as the kind of 80s throwback to the John Hughes type movies, and even with the references to Ferris Bueller, like the chase through the neighborhood and stuff. I enjoyed it for that because I know we had a discussion when we were talking about it before that, maybe Spidey should be older, but I like seeing him a little younger and dealing with some of this stuff. I just kind of wish this had come before Civil War in a way, because he just felt like a more well-rounded, more capable character then. So for me, it's not necessarily the movies before it, like the Maguire or Garfield movies. It's his own appearance that I'm relating it to, and it just doesn't seem to jive. I
didn't like it. I mean, I just didn't. And I mean, and I don't think I'm being a get off my lawn, old school kind of guy in that respect. I don't think it stands on its own very well. I think that the film has so many holes in it that honestly it did collapse ultimately as a film. And there's too many inconsistencies for me to overlook them. There's a lot of things we didn't even get into in this review that don't make a lot of sense, whether they make random references historically or they make odd changes in his personality or his characteristics. All those things have to remain the same. It's inherent. What would you do if you changed Superman? He's suddenly not hampered by kryptonite. Suddenly he can only leap a certain height.
He's afraid of heights.
Yeah, he's afraid of heights.
Suddenly he doesn't have a mustache.
Right. There are certain understood characteristics, mannerisms, and skills that Spider-Man has. And he has to have them. It's just non-negotiable. It just simply is non-negotiable. Uncle Ben is non-negotiable.
Not being afraid of heights is
right,
not
it is.
negotiable.
But even if you want to reference the comics, you look at the Spideyverse comics, every one of those characters has an Uncle Ben or some character like that across the expanse of the Spider Universe.
Yeah.
Everybody's got somebody like that. And then for them to just void it is truly absurd. That's where I'm just left with it was just a non-negotiable and they took it out.
I think they just glossed over everything a little too much. They didn't want to be guilty of showing the origin story again for the third time, and they just glossed over too much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's going to be, years before we get the Spider-Man Homecoming 2, the sequel to this film.
Right.
So by the time we would get to that point, it'd be like coming all the way back to here to tell those stories. So at this point, it's just, we have to, this is how this universe is laid out. Take it or leave it, and just step forward and enjoy it. And I feel like Spider-Man is a very generational thing. We all grew up with a certain kind of Spider-Man, and that's the Spider-Man that we want to see on the screen. And at the end of the day, I don't think that there's a way to really please everybody. You can please a lot of people, but you can't please everybody with Spider-Man.
Ooh, I don't know. I'm gonna have to disagree.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think he is such a consistent character that he will, if you have those certain moral ethic characteristics, certain things that you do all the time, that is timeless. That is just, there are characters that are timeless.
With great characters come a great responsibility to convey them well.
Very well said.
You heard it here,
Very
folks.
well said.
So that's Spider-Man Homecoming. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this Road to Infinity War episode. Man, we are getting so close to Infinity War, and I can't wait. So we'll see you guys on the next one. And dude, seriously, thanks for tuning in. I should have done that.
Yeah.
Do it again?
Do it again?
3, 2.
Nah.
Okay. Rolling. Keep them doggies rolling.
Raw.
I think I just found our post-credit scene.
You're not in it though.
No, I was there.